What do the following films all have in common? I Shot Andy Warhol, a film about Valerie Solanas, the fringe feminist figure who nearly killed Andy Warhol. The Heartbreak Kid, a film about a man's remorse over his recent marriage, and Dogma, a raucous comedy about two fallen angels adamant on their destructive return to heaven. It's that there is currently no legitimate way to access these films. While pirating films or watching poor quality rips on YouTube can be an option for difficult to access films, depending on the price, if it ever even had a physical release, you may even find a pre-owned copy, but these methods don't resolve the issue at hand. There is an increasing number of films who have lost their distribution rights. To put it bluntly, Terry Mikesell wrote about the issue of film inaccessibility for the Columbus Dispatch. Want to see an older movie? Good luck with that. Film archivists have estimated that half of all American films made before 1950, and more than 90% of films made before 1929, are lost forever. The loss of distribution rights doesn't necessarily mean these films are always considered lost media, but it certainly destroys their availability through physical media, streaming services, television broadcasting, and even digital storefront access. Not only does it make accessing these films difficult for passionate film lovers, but it makes it even more challenging to support the filmmakers behind these creations. The reasoning behind film inaccessibility can boil down to 5 key issues. There is no current distributor, possibly due to the misconception that these films may not appeal to current audiences. The film contains lost elements and therefore parts of the film could be recognised as lost media. The film rights are lost, and nobody seems to know how to track down whoever owned them. There's indifference from the distributor, unable to see a market for a certain film, or the film may never have had a distributor to begin with, unfortunately causing the film to fall between the cracks into obscurity. For film lovers, filmmakers and archivists, this is bound to be a frustrating issue. How can you begin to secure the rights of a film when the rights are lost, or the owner is unwilling to sell them? Who even owns the rights to these films, if they're unwilling to do anything with them? In the case of Elaine May's classic The Heartbreak Kid, the owners of the film rights are known. Despite her initially understated career, Elaine May has shaped a cultural impact that has influenced women filmmakers and independent American cinema. Elaine May's modern influence on the likes of Greta Gerwig, Noah Baumbach, Wes Anderson, Ben Stiller, and Emma Seligman is undeniable. With her influence present in a much wider cinematic landscape being more accepted in the modern day, it's peculiar that her second feature as a director, the Oscar-nominated The Heartbreak Kid, continues to remain inaccessible through legitimate means. In his article on the subject, Noah Gittell wrote for The Guardian stating that the reason you can't see The Heartbreak Kid legitimately is because a pharmaceutical company doesn't want you to. Bristol Myers Squibb owns the rights to the film, a holdover from the brief period in the 1970s when its executives decided it would be cool to be in the movie business. In 2021, the company has announced no plans to sell the rights to an actual distributor. It feels like a counterproductive business decision to initially plan to go into movie distribution, investing real money, only to then just sit on a film's rights and do absolutely nothing with them. With no plans to sell the rights, and no plans to self-release the film themselves, you have to wonder what even is the point of securing film rights, only to hide the work away from the wider public. Another example to add here is Mary Harron's directorial debut, I Shot Andy Warhol, a film exploring the fringe ideas of Valerie Solanas, a lesbian activist who wished to work with Andy Warhol and dismantle reliance on patriarchy, but her mental health decline and constant chastisement led to the attempted assassination of Warhol. Later in his article, Noah Gittell discusses Harron's film, stating that, despite winning an award at the Sundance Film Festival and earning largely positive reviews, the film has suffered the same fate as The Heartbreak Kid. It's simply not available. Its director, Mary Harron, explains the problem succinctly. Most indie films are produced by small companies, and most of them go bankrupt. This is especially true of films in the 80s and 90s, when new independent production companies were being created daily. Harron says I Shot Andy Warhol was sold 3 times before it was even released, due to the ephemerality of the film distribution business. It has been a struggle for her to even determine who owns her first film, let alone convince them to distribute it, or sell the rights to a company that will. Mary Harron highlights an issue in that independent production companies, unable to continue producing more work, go bankrupt, understandably making it even more challenging to recognise who bought the film rights for cheap, as well as why they even bought the film rights, if there was never any intent to re-release the film after the liquidation of the initial production company. There's certainly a strong essence of tragedy in a filmmaker not knowing who owns the rights to their debut film. All the figurative blood, sweat and tears poured into the creation of a passion project film, only for it to be hidden from the public eye. So what can be done about this issue? How can film rights be reacquired and utilised productively to make these types of films more accessible to a wider public? This is where Missing Movies becomes hugely significant. An independent group of filmmakers, including Mary Harron, archivists, distributors and cinephiles, Missing Movies aims to seek out lost distribution rights, lost film elements, and to advocate for the improvement of film preservation for the future. Missing Movies have curated a list of films that they are aiming to seek the rights for, assisting in their future distribution. Films such as Julie Taymor's surrealist Shakespearean adaptation of Titus Andronicus starring Anthony Hopkins, Titus, William Greaves's documentary portrait of Muhammad Ali, Ali the Fighter, and Eat the Document, a documentary directed by Bob Dylan and shot by D.A. Pennebaker, focused on chronicling Dylan's tour of Europe in 1966. While it's disappointing that films such as these, focusing on hugely appealing subject matter, directed by influential filmmakers and featuring popular figures, had lost distribution rights, it's hugely encouraging that an organisation such as Missing Movies is seeking these films out. Their current progress has led to the redistribution of Mississippi Masala by Mira Nair being re-released by Criterion, the discovery of Ossie Davis's Black Girl, and even the Oscar-winning Hector Babenco queer drama Kiss of the Spider Woman, while celebrating the reacquisition of films with the intent to redistribute them to the public, making underrated and classic films more accessible once again after they had fallen through the cracks for so long. It's important to remember why films such as these need preservation. Later in Noah Gittell's article, Amy Heller, co-founder of Missing Movies and a film distributor herself, elaborates on why film preservation is important. When you look at the kinds of films that are not available, explains Amy Heller, co-founder of Milestone Film and Video, a boutique distribution company, and Missing Movies, you see documentaries about poor people, Native Americans, queer people, disabled people. These images are part of our world, and we can't afford to lose them. Black directors are overrepresented on the list of Missing Movies, with films from Charles Burnett and William Greaves currently undistributed. The lack of preservation of film distribution for black filmmakers and queer voices is very telling. The removal of these films from the public eye, or the way in which these films fell through the cracks for too long, their distribution and preservation not prioritised, becomes a form of erasure for the underrepresented voices within filmmaking. By aiming to reacquire the distribution rights for these films, the intention is to remedy this situation, not only raising awareness for these films, but to remind us that film preservation is essential, that the filmmaking voices of underrepresented communities are worth celebrating, because film should be available for everyone. In conclusion, while many of the films mentioned in this video are available through pirated rips or YouTube uploads, it's important to acknowledge the issue of lack of accessibility via legitimate means referring to methods of access which can continue to support the filmmaker, such as physical media, broadcasting, streaming, and digital storefronts, has a genuinely negative impact on the preservation of film history, especially regarding underrepresented filmmaking voices. However, with the progress of groups like Missing Movies, the efforts of film archivists, and the continued awareness raised around the subject of lost film rights, it feels the future will become brighter for film preservation. A special thank you to my incredible tier patron supporter Gil, and my super tier patron supporters Konstantin Bombelli and Jamie.